Aren't we fascinating as humans? We create art, machines, and imaginary worlds. Our emotions catch us off guard. We love, we dream, and occasionally we kill each other too. I traveled the world to bring you postcards from other people's lives. Decisions that changed everything, hopes that became dreams, disasters, bad influences, and hard lessons. If, like me, you find being human a remarkably surprising experience, join me on this journey through the lives of others. You might even find traces of your own story in them. So hi and welcome. This is the very first episode of The Lives of Others. My name is Gosia Radzkiewicz and I'm here with Tracy Plale, who is going to be my first guest. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, I'm so excited to be your first guest. What a privilege.
Me too. Thanks for responding positively to my invitation. Tracy is my friend who I met a few weeks ago at a retreat. Tracy also runs her own communications company and has quite a story to it. There's also another business that we're going to be talking about today, and a story about shedding. Is that the right expression to use?
That's the right expression to use. 2025 has become the year of shedding, not intentionally initially, but it's become a theme of my year in a way that has opened up all kinds of new and exciting possibilities in my life. So it's been a really interesting transition to take in my life. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I was so inspired to hear just a trace of what must be the whole story. I wanted to also explain how Tracy and I ended up here on two sides of Microsoft Teams. I heard this chunk of Tracy's story at the retreat. It sounded very exciting. A person who sold her a very unusual house, moved into a van with 2 dogs, and runs her own company on top of all that, and also decided to launch a venture with a newly met person. I'm really curious, Tracy, could you tell me what was the first shedding moment for you in 2025 and how it all started?
I guess it started in 2024. In fact, it started even earlier than that. I've been on a very much in my adult life on a journey of acquiring lots of stuff. Like many people, we hold a lot of value in material objects, belongings, owning property, and all of that. My entire narrative around life was that your worth was closely attached to what you owned. That was a representation of how successful you've been in life. That almost got out of control for me during the pandemic years and the subsequent years afterwards. During the lockdown period in the UK, I started to acquire even more stuff. I think I was one of those people that filled the additional time by taking on new projects and doing new things, binge eating quite a lot. During the pandemic years, I put on a lot of weight. My body started to acquire quite a lot. I got unhealthy. I acquired lots more stuff in my house. I also acquired a van. One of my projects was a camper van conversion. So that was one of the more positive aspects of these acquisitions that I made. By the way, I owned a converted funeral chapel. It was my house. It was a big 4-bedroom converted church in a graveyard. It was huge and it had a lot of space for one person to fill. I'd already built this camper van during those years and I built it like a little luxury apartment on wheels. It really is like a tiny home on wheels. I love that project. And so I'd been going out on adventures. In 2024, I decided that I was going to spend a month of the summer in Scandinavia. So off I drove via Sweden to meet my best friend who lives in New York but flies out to Sweden every year for the summer. Spent a little bit of time with her and then drove up into Norway and spent the rest of the summer up in Norway. And while I was on that trip, it became very apparent to me that living in a camper van was completely achievable for me. I could easily work from the road. The lifestyle was incredible. It felt very free. At that point, I didn't have the idea of moving into the van. I was still very attached to my house, still loved it. Got home. The first day that I got back, I walked into my house. It was a very privileged existence that I lived there. I had a beautiful bedroom suite with a walk-in wardrobe and an ensuite bathroom and all of the nice stuff that lots of us dream of having. I walked into my walk-in wardrobe and I was completely hit with this sense of overwhelm with the amount of clothes that I owned. It was just a horrible mess in there. So many of us just acquire all these clothes. And because I put on weight, I had multiple sizes in everything as well. It was full of all the clothes that no longer fit me and all of these bigger sizes that I wasn't particularly proud to own. And I walked in and I looked at it all and I just felt immediately anxious and stressed. I literally closed the door, walked all the way out of my house, locked my house back up, and spent that first night sleeping back in the camper van on my drive. That for me was the first sign that there was something about stuff that was somehow interacting with my mental health in a way that was not as empowering as I wanted it to be. So alongside that, I've also had this business. I've been running the business for 18 years. At this point in summer last year, I'm employing about 10, 11 people. And we're working in the education sector that financially was not in a good place. Business was tough. We had also acquired a lot of debt during the pandemic years to keep paying people's salaries. Another part of this acquisition. So I just acquired so much stuff. I'd acquired weight, I'd acquired stuff, I'd acquired debt, I'd acquired people. And I think I was just getting to the stage where I felt like I was bursting under the weight of all of this. By the new year, it was starting to feel like quite a lot. The first decision that I took in the new year was my health. I started to decide that I was going to lose weight, and complete transparency, decided to jump on the weight loss injection bandwagon, which has been amazing. I've lost about 30 kilograms this year. And that was the first part of it. But it wasn't like a theme of I'm going to shed all of this stuff. Yeah. By March, I was out in Ireland, touring around Ireland and Northern Ireland in the camper van for work with my dogs. I just had this day where I realised that I needed to get rid of it all. The responsibility of employing all of these people and paying their salaries. I wasn't happy. I felt like my only responsibility in life was just to pay other people's salaries rather than do the work that I loved. I didn't really feel like I had a social life at all. I didn't feel like I had the space or capacity in my life to connect with people and develop partnerships. I just felt a little bit stuck. I realized that one of the routes for me to develop a sense of freedom and to get rid of some of the debts was actually to sell my property. And that would also get rid of all these belongings. So yeah, that was how it started. In March, I made the decision that I was going to sell the house, move full-time into the camper van. And that all ended up happening very quickly, or very quickly by British standards. The house went on the market, sold within a weekend for over the asking price. I ended up making a nice amount of money on it. By the beginning of July, I was pretty much debt-free, had let most of my team go in the company. I now only actually employ one person other than myself, and was hitting the road and spent the summer driving around Scandinavia. Now spend my life parked up wherever I want to be parked up, really. It's amazing.
I've got so many questions. questions. Let's start with the house, because I know the house wasn't just a house. You've already mentioned that it was a converted chapel, right?
Yeah.
A funeral chapel with the cemetery around it, right? Could you tell me a little bit more about it, and how did you come to acquire it in the first place as well?
Yeah, sure. So I had lived in that house for about 9 years, just over 9 years. I actually bought it originally with my ex-partner. He and I saw this property come up on the market. We were both the kind of people that wasn't likely to want to live in a normal semi-detached house. We were the kind of people that probably wanted to live somewhere a little bit unusual. And we bought this house together. The chapel was built in 1862 as part of a cemetery development in Gateshead, where I lived. And they were building a much, much larger cemetery because of the Industrial Revolution. There was an explosion in population. And, when you get increased population, you also get increased death as well. So they needed somewhere bigger out of the town centre to be able to bury everybody. And that meant they also needed a couple of funeral chapels to deal with the amount of funerals they had to accommodate. My chapel was the nonconformist chapel. There was one opposite it, which was the Church of England chapel. Beautiful. It's a Victorian design, designed by a very notable architect in the Newcastle area. It's just a gorgeous limestone building with metre-thick walls and a garden that goes the whole way around. The cemetery was outside of my perimeter, so I didn't have any responsibility for it. And officially, the cemetery itself closed in the 1980s. The chapel stopped being used for funerals and fell into disrepair. They were just being used by the local council for storage, until a developer came along in about 2015, bought the chapel and turned it into a property. I didn't do the conversion myself, but I bought it from the developer. I was the first person to live in it. 6 months after moving into it, my ex and I actually split up.
Oh,
The most
gosh.
amicable split in the world. We're still very close friends now, even to this day, but he's my best friend. We decided that I would keep the property and he would move back into the place he owned that we had lived in previously. I stayed living there by myself, acquired more dogs over the years, and built a workshop, which then became the thing that I used to build the van on the drive. It was a beautiful place to live, and I love it very much, but it was time to move on. It was too much property for me to manage by myself.
Yeah, I can understand that. It must have its way to have all that space and stuff in it. And so one question, we are recording just before Halloween. Please tell me you did host Halloween parties in your converted funeral chapel. Please tell me you got people dressing up as something crazy.
So you'd be surprisingly disappointed. I actually lived quite
no.
It's funny because I'm an extrovert personality, but my connections tend to be spread all around the world. So I tend to have friends in like all kinds of cities in far-flung places, but not necessarily a huge social circle where I lived. So we didn't host a big Halloween party, but I had decorated the house a few times for Halloween. The very first year, we set up a projector with a kind of panel over the windows, and we pointed the projector at it, and we ran like scenes of ghosts flying in across the windows and piped eerie music into the graveyard. It was quite spooky. This was when I just moved in there. I'd only lived there for about 6 or 7 months at that point. It was almost disappointing. It's the perfect property for Halloween, but nobody would ever come knocking for trick or treating because
Are
they
you
were probably too
serious?
scared. Seriously, I think they were too scared. Some people didn't realize it was a house. And I think people like, small children thought it was a bit scary. But honestly, it wasn't scary at all. It was such a warm and cozy place to live. And people always like to ask me, did I ever like see anything unusual or experience any kind of paranormal thing? And honestly, like I never did the entire 9 years that I was living there. The only things I ever experienced were this overwhelming sense of like warmth and happiness and joy in the property, which you wouldn't associate with a funeral chapel. That it had such a beautiful energy about it. It was a really lovely place to live.
So it must have been pretty cozy. And you mentioned that you started acquiring more dogs. Am I correct that you're currently at 2?
I'm actually at 3 at the moment, and I
Okay.
did get up to 4 for a little while as well. I had the dog that I shared with my ex, so we kind of co-parented her. Then I acquired 3 more dogs at the start of the pandemic within the space of about 7 months. For a little while I had 4, but then sadly my Labrador, my first dog, passed away 2 years ago. I'm back down to 3 again now. I live in the camper van with 3 dogs. It can be quite tight and cozy at times, and I do spend most of my life cleaning up dog hair.
Right. As a cat owner, I can relate. My house is always full of, and I've sort of given up on trying to make everything clean. It's completely impossible to do. I've got another question. What sort of dogs are they? Are they big dogs, small dogs? Are they very dynamic?
They're all rescue dogs. They all come from Southeastern Europe. Monty is the oldest, and he looks like a white Labrador, but he's not. He's quarter German Shepherd and lots of other mixed breeds. All of them are mixed breed dogs. Monty is about 30 kilograms, a big dog, and he's gorgeous. He's snoring next to me right now. Unfortunately, the mic isn't picking it up. But and then, so he was found chained to a tree in a forest in Romania. He presumably was owned by someone because he had some water, but he wasn't looked after very well. He was rescued by a lady out there called Dutza, who goes around and just spends her entire life rescuing dogs. She and I are actually connected on Facebook, so she still gets to see the updates of his life. My other 2 are half brother and sister, Harper and Finn. They were a litter of 4 puppies that were found on the streets of Macedonia in the winter without their mum. They were rescued and they had to wait for 6 months before they were allowed to bring them into the UK. I didn't intend to rescue 2 of them. It was kind of an accident that I ended up with 2. One of them didn't yet have a home to go to, and she was the only one in the litter that didn't have a home to go to. I couldn't bear for her to be left in the kennels by herself. So on the day that I was going to pick them up, decided to get both of them. All 3 of them are very reactive. They don't like other dogs very much. They are very nervous around meeting new people. So it means that I spend my life kind of looking for nice, quiet places to walk them. They love living in the camper van because it feels like a much cozier, safer space. A lot of their anxiety that they experienced in my house, where they would bark at everyone walking past the fence, disappears in the van. Living van life with the dogs also means that because we are constantly moving, they get to explore a new walk every single day, like new sniffs, new experiences, new environments. And that's so good for them, so good for their mental health, so good for tiring them out. And yeah, it's such a great life for them.
Hmm. And typically, do you guys spend most of your days on camping places, like camping sites, or would you rather park somewhere that's more remote?
Yeah, I prefer remote places. It's a little bit difficult in the UK. Technically, in the UK, you're not really supposed to camp off grid, but there's very grey descriptions of what is camping, what's not camping. So long as you do it discreetly and leave no mess. I'm completely self-contained in my van. I have hot water, a shower, a toilet, full kitchen facilities. I can very easily live off grid in this van. So for me, it's quite easy, but the UK is not very friendly towards camper vans. So my plan is to spend half of the year in the UK and the other half of the year traveling around the EU or the EEC countries. As much as I possibly can and stretch out my allowance to be able to. Eventually, I would like to move to Scandinavia and become get a digital nomad visa in one of the countries there. I try to be off-grid. I do go to campsites every so often. Right now, I'm parked at a reservoir where you're allowed to park overnight here. It's just £10 to park overnight. This is one of the few places where it's not a campsite, but you are actually allowed to be in your motorhome overnight. So yeah, I move around quite a lot.
The reservoir must be beautiful for the dogs.
It is beautiful. It's really windy today, even though it's inland water. There's white water. Last night we parked at the coast and it was wild last night because there was a storm. So all you could hear all night was the wind rocking the van, the rain coming down, which I love. But you could also hear the waves crashing against the breakwater. So the place that I parked last night, I've parked there a few times now, was like 25 minutes away from my house. And I'd never been there before until I moved into the camper van. It's now opening up my access to places that I had never visited, even though they were right on my doorstep. Right now, I am back in the northeast of England, which is home, or what I refer to as home. But I will be travelling around. I'll be heading south next week. I'll be in Norway next weekend. After that, I'll be driving with the van down to Switzerland for work and moving around quite a lot.
That all sounds really exciting. Do you sometimes get tired of the moving, or is it something that fuels you actually?
It does fuel me. I've done longer trips over the winter months when I still had the house. I've not yet done the winter as a full-time van lifer, so that's going to be quite interesting to see how that goes. I know the van can cope with it. I've got a few more upgrades I need to make. It can be a little bit tiring. I'm still figuring out the balance of the schedule between driving and getting work done, because I am still running this business. I've still got commitments to my consultancy clients, plus I've got the new business that you've alluded to as well. So I do have quite a few commitments that require me to sit in the van and work as well. Getting that balance right is interesting. At the moment, I'm starting to find that driving in the evenings tends to work better for me. That's when I'm less likely to want to work anyway. I do tend to move between places in the evenings. Today, I moved in the afternoon. It's a weekend, so I'll probably just end up watching a movie tonight rather than working.
Especially in a nice, beautiful place, if you can just walk outside in the morning, take the dogs out and look at nature. Dream.
It's so nice to be able to throw the door open. The dream with the camper van started because I'm a trained coach. I do leadership coaching, but I'm trained as a life coach. As part of that work, you support people in declaring their goals, setting visions and moving towards those goals. I do a lot of that work for myself. A number of years ago, during the pandemic, I had a vision board. And on that vision board, I had a picture of 3 dogs because I knew that I wanted to have more than one dog. I had an image on there that represented financial abundance and being debt-free. I had an image of the front cover of my book, which I have published since. And I had some stuff alluding to getting healthy. And the other thing that I had a picture of on that vision board was a cabin on a lake or on a fjord in Norway. The dream was to own a cabin on a fjord. I realised that at that point in my life, I didn't have the money. I don't have the right to live in Norway. So I realised that for me, it was a dream that I was kicking down the road. I was doing what I refer to as condition stacking. Condition stacking is when you put lots of conditions in place before you can actually do the thing. I will do it when I've got enough money. I will do it when I've got a residency in Norway. And I realised that I was condition stacking and that was getting in the way of the dream. So I asked myself, what is the dream in service of? Rather than it needing to be a cabin on a lake, what is that in service of in my life? The answer was it was in service of adventure. It was in service of solitude. It was in service of freedom. It was in service of being in nature. And when I then worked back from that place and asked myself, how could I achieve those things now without it having to be through a cabin on the lake? Was there another way that I could do that? And the answer to that was I could build the cabin and I could drive it to the lake. So that was when the idea of the camper van came into being. The way that I describe it to people now is that one night my home is a cabin on a lake. The next night my home is a beach hut. The next night my home is a riverside lodge. And honestly, there are some nights when my home is a park in an industrial estate, somewhere not glamorous. I don't tend to show on Instagram those pictures very much. Sometimes it's not a particularly nice park up, but it does mean that every feels like it's a different variation of what most people dream of. And it costs me very little.
I love that. Is there anything that you do not enjoy about that lifestyle?
At the moment, the only thing I miss is having laundry facilities, a washing machine. Just some things take a little more effort, like doing the laundry. Because I live with dogs, there's a lot of laundry. I have to wash sofa covers, blankets and duvets every week. So having to plan that in a little more, whereas when you're in a house, you can just throw it in the washing machine and it's all taken care of. That's the only thing that I think I've found a little bit problematic. Oh, and the other thing with living in a camper van is that you are constantly repairing it. Something is always breaking. These vans are not designed for, and parts that you use in them are not designed to be in a moving vehicle. So something is always breaking, something always needs repairing, but that's fine. I've grown up with tools in my hand. So I quite like the challenge of fixing stuff and repairing stuff anyway. So it's not really a problem, but yeah, it is just the reality of living in a van.
That sounds awesome. And especially if you've got the skill, every time I've thought about actually trying to get myself a camper van and trying to move into it, I was always scared that if something breaks, I'll be just stuck, especially if it breaks somewhere remotely and I don't have access to spare parts. That was a bit terrifying. So I envy you definitely when it comes to these skills.
Some of it I don't know how to do. You rely on YouTube a lot. You figure it out as you go along. I've had to learn a lot of new things as well. But so far, it's been fine. I once had to call a tow truck to get me out of being stuck, which was kind of entertaining. It was fine. It was in Norway. I happened to have a native Norwegian speaker with me, which helped. But then everyone in Norway speaks perfect English, so I didn't really need them to help. So that turned into being a little bit funny and a slightly unnecessary expense, but such is life.
Adventures, I guess. Adventures are not always just exciting, good things that happen, right?
And those are the kind of things that help you develop resilience. These are the kind of things that when they happen and suddenly you're fine afterwards, you go, oh, right, okay, I can deal with that. If that ever happens again, I've got this. There are little things that you worry about in advance, but then when they actually happen, you realize that the reality is nowhere near what you made it out to be in your head.
When we're talking about this, I wonder about the other part of shedding that you were talking about, which were your employees. And that must have been something that you probably feared quite a lot. How would it feel to have to let people go? How did that go and how did you actually feel about it in reality?
Yeah, it was a long time coming. The initial idea of it formed during the pandemic when we weren't making enough money to pay everybody. So I started borrowing money to pay people. So we knew that might happen. And we did end up restructuring the company during that stage and let a couple of people go. It sounds awful, but I'd had a little bit of practice in a small scale with letting a couple of people go from the company. It was always heartbreaking because I was very good at hiring very good people who had a real heart and commitment and were just an absolute joy to work with. And also, I'm a bit of a mama bear type character. If I'm employing someone, I feel like I really need to look after them and nurture them. I also employ people that had families. So you don't just feel responsible for one person's salary. You feel responsible for their family's financial situation. That was tough, but I'd always been very open and transparent about financial situations in the company with my employees. They were always very much involved in those conversations. And so when we did get to the stage of deciding that we were going to let some people go, it was no surprise to anybody. Everybody felt that it was the right decision. They also had seen and knew the kind of stress it put me under. I was just very, very privileged to have a lot of loyalty in the team and a lot of goodwill towards me, which really helped. They realized it wasn't a selfish decision. It wasn't anything I hadn't spent a long time thinking about. For a number of years, I'd been wanting to shift the company to become more of an associate model of working rather than an employee-led company anyway. So I'd always been thinking about slimming it down and having more freelancers working for us. It wasn't entirely financially driven. Initially, I was just going to drop 2 people, but then a couple of people that remained didn't really want to work for a team that was quite so small. They wanted more human connection, which I totally understand. So when they chose to leave, we decided not to recruit. We're just down to 2 of us now. We get on very well. Some of the people that worked for me in the past still work with me as freelancers now, which is lovely.
Okay, so it doesn't sound as scary as you probably projected it at the beginning.
I always knew that because I employ brilliant people, they were going to be fine. They were all going to walk into great roles, if not even better from a financial perspective than I was able to offer them. And that has been the reality. I was very confident in them and their ability to cope with it and our ability to support them through it. I guess what I didn't know was how it would feel for me, having managed and led so many people, to then just be down to 2 is quite freeing. I don't now spend my weeks doing one-to-ones with people. I don't spend my weeks in to win the next piece of business because I've got a big salary bill to pay. I'm much more hands-on again with the work that I love doing.
What do you feel right now about your company? Do you intend to keep it small as it is? Or do you think at some point you will be trying to restructure it again?
My current intention is to keep it small. I'm in conversations with a lot of people about the associate model of working at the moment, and that's starting to look quite clear as to how that would work. It's become a very popular model of working. Increasingly, we're finding that clients are amenable to it, whereas in the past, some clients have not been amenable to it. They want you to have full-time employees. Now they realise it can work. Yes, it takes a bit more coordination, but the benefit of it is that I can actually now bring onto projects people who are much more senior and more experienced in their career than I would ever be able to employ in the company. So I can piece together a really exciting team for client projects as well. So yeah, I feel pretty good about it at the moment. And it has freed me up to return to looking at the portfolio of my business interests rather than just feeling like I'm focusing on the one thing all the time.
That's really interesting what you're saying. I can also recognize a little bit of my own thoughts in that idea that project-based work is becoming more and more popular. So this is also how I've been working for years now. Absolutely, for some people, the stability of employment is going to be what is the most important argument about whether they're going to decide to work for a certain company or not, or with a certain company. But there must be more people like me or you who feel that the project-based work also provides more variety, more options. It's, I guess, I don't know, more fun.
For those of us that like to hop between projects and, don't just want to be doing the same thing every day in, day out, I think and obviously there are some people out there that feel like they need the security of a regular salary. I think for some people it is quite a big leap of faith to jump over to that way of working. I've been working this way for 18 years now. So for me, I've very much proven to myself that it's completely sustainable. It works really well for me. I think I'm at a point now where I'm unemployable. I don't think I would ever go back to working in-house. It would have to be a superb, really exciting role that would entice me to work in-house in an organisation again.
That also rings a bell about the relationship sphere to me. I read this quote recently: I'm only going to have you if your presence is sweeter than my solitude. And if we project that onto the working environment, that sort of feels like, okay, I'm just going to commit full time to something that is so good that my project-based work feels worse than that.
What a great quote.
I think I got it somewhere on this that resonated.
It resonates so much with me as well because I love my solitude. I mean, I think this is almost a condition for van life as well. You do have to be quite comfortable in your solitude. So some people ask the question about what are the downsides to van life or what don't I like about it. If you ask that question of some people that have become a full-time van lifer, they will say that the thing that they don't like is that there are moments where you can be alone. I'm deliberately not using the word lonely because loneliness is not really a feeling that I ever experience because I love my solitude so much. I've got very good at being alone and knowing how to get my social needs met. But that is one thing I know some people struggle with. One of the things that I've done to overcome that is to date on the road. I identify as being polyamorous. So for me, having different partners, different connections all around the place is a lovely way of connecting with people. This is one of the things that happened for me was when I did all of the shedding, I had space in my head, my heart, my life, my body, my time, my schedule to be able to actually open myself up for developing new partnerships as well, and romantic or sexual connections as well. For me, that opened up the space, but also being on the road, dating on the road is a really fun way of meeting new people in cool places, seeing some of the local area that you probably wouldn't see if you were just rocking up as a tourist, and potentially developing more lasting connections as well.
Do you have any stories that you would like to share about that? They could be good stories and they can be also funny stories. Anything's welcome.
I mean, I'll tell you the story of the founding of my new company because that has come from one of these connections. Yeah, it seems like a good way to segue into that. I was driving through the Nordic countries, not just Scandinavia. It was in Finland as well during the summer months this year. Just dating on different, I mostly use Field, and I connected with a guy. He lives in northern Norway up in the Arctic Circle. And it was actually he had only just joined this dating site. He'd been warned off of it by some other people. They said it wasn't very good, so he'd not really bothered. For some reason, he just decided that week he was going to just have a look. And he put himself on that site, and I was the first person that he connected with. I was about 3 days away from rocking up in where he lived in that area. We connected, but very much discussed it. It was just going to be a hookup. We were honestly completely blunt. I'm very sex positive, so we were just going to meet for sex if there was a chemistry there. And we met and we got on really well. We actually was clearly getting on very well before we met. We were having interesting conversations about kink, about communication, about the conversation that we were having around the planning, around the meet we were going to have was unlike any conversation I'd ever had with a guy before. There was a level of respect that this guy was starting to show that was in parallel to some of the other people that I was talking with on the site. I jokingly said to him, you ought to be out there teaching people this stuff. You ought to be running workshops for other guys in the way in which you approach this because you really get it right. We met, we got on, we had a great time. We met the next night again and we stayed connected, and we met the next week. He flew down and visited me. I carried on my travels and our conversations continued about the culture of respect that we were both really standing for in the kind of kink space and in relationships. Eventually, we ended up forming a thing called Respectful Kink. We launched it about a month ago. It's just respectfulkink.com. And at the moment, it is just a website. We are also writing a book together. It's called The Human Guide to Kink. So we're hoping to publish that next year. And yeah, we have, big plans for where we're going to take it, and we're pretty excited about it. And it's just a really, really interesting way of developing like a new partnership and a new connection with someone in a way that was quite unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very excited for you. I hope to see much more of your work when it comes to this area as well. Do you have an idea on what sort of knowledge you will be trying to deliver? The book, sort of the title speaks for itself, but the website, the social media accounts, and so on and so forth, what people should be expecting to find there?
Yeah, I like to talk about it as being for people who are kinky or kink curious. It's a curiosity about kink that doesn't necessarily exist only in the realm of sex. The perspective I bring to this is slightly different. So we're both bringing something slightly different to the party. I'm really fascinated by human communication, I'm a communications consultant, right? So I work in communication space and as a coach as well. I work a lot in that space of human dynamics. But I also do a lot of work in leadership. One of the things that came up in our conversations was I was reflecting to him quite a lot. There is an awful lot that we can learn in the realms of leadership from the way in which we communicate in a kink or scene-based scenario, especially when we get into the realm of power play and BDSM. Some of the better practices in that world have the most incredible leadership lessons for us. That, for me, is the place where I kind of want to play with it, is around what can we take from the world of kink that actually makes us better human beings in how we lead, how we communicate, how we develop non-sexual relationships as much as those sexual relationships as well, romantic relationships. So there is a lot that we're bringing to it that's like, how do you explore kink in a way that is respectful? But then taking that further and saying, once you've got those foundations of respect, which are really based around curiosity, communication, openness, transparency, asking rather than making assumptions, we've got a whole manifesto around it that we've set out, key components of it. Once you've got that foundation in place in the kink space, how do you then apply that in the rest of your lives to improve all interactions that you have, to shift your own relationship to power as well? One of my biggest frustrations in the coaching work that I do is the number of people that will arrive to work with me as their coach. I talk to them about what are their goals in life or how do they want their life to be. And the goal that they set for themselves is to be content. For me, that's like, why would you only want to go for contentment when you could shoot for joy? We stop at contentment because some of us think it's the best that it can get. We don't allow ourselves to be in these really kind of, worthy conversations around pleasure and joy, and to really allow ourselves to have that full experience of all of it. And we stop so short in life. And, I'm a 45-year-old woman, and a lot of women at my age, older, and I've definitely seen it amongst younger women as well. When it comes to things like sex, we stop short, right? We still behave like we are objects that exist in service of pleasing another. I think there's a lot to be said for us reinventing the conversation around that, really leaning into joy and pleasure for ourselves, and then taking those lessons from anywhere in our lives and applying them in other parts of our life. That was quite a big answer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It sounds super exciting. And I would never have made that discovery myself to sort of think about projecting some of the things that happen in the BDSM dynamics onto leadership. To be honest, I would love to hear one of my bosses say that, oh, I've been to Tracy's training and I got these new ideas from them. That sounds fascinating. What you were talking about in relation to things like pleasure or what we are allowing for ourselves to be, I think it reflects itself in many situations and in many kinds of relationship. Obviously, not just in sexual relationships, but I've met many women who feel like they've restrained themselves somehow. Yeah. They feel that they are just out there to be meeting someone else's needs, that have been consuming this sort of narrative for most of their lives. And I'm in my 40s and I'm trying to reach out to these areas that have been dormant for so long because they were never allowed to speak. I'm hoping that the amount of narrative that is not going out there right now is going to make it easier for younger generations. And again, not just in the sphere of sexuality, but also in all sorts of connections with people, a conversation with a bus driver or at work. There are so many areas in which we don't give each other enough because we were never presented with the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, just being fully transparent about it and talking about it is the first step. I don't have children, but I do have a sister and she has 3 children. I'm an auntie and it's one of my favourite roles. My nephews and niece are 19, almost 18 and 15. They're teenagers. They're very much in that stage of their life where they're exploring their own sexuality and all of that kind of stuff. They were raised in a kind of Catholic environment from my brother-in-law's side of the family. They went to private Catholic schools, not really the kind of environment known for being sex positive. I am very publicly talking about this and my family are all very aware of what I'm doing. They are uncomfortable about it. I know that my nephews and my niece have seen some of the stuff I put on Instagram and they've kind of like said to their mum all like, oh, how should we react to this? When Auntie Tracy who's talking about, sex and that kind of stuff out there. For me, it's just a really important part of it. One of the questions I found myself grappling with when I started talking publicly about respectful kink was about anonymity in doing this work. On the one hand, I need to keep myself safe. I'm a van lifer and I'm a woman living by herself. I live a reasonably vulnerable existence from that perspective. There was a moment where I was like, shall I do this under a pseudonym? Shall I not use my real name in this work? Then I realized I relate to myself as being sex positive. If I was to not do this as fully as myself and publicly as myself, that would be the complete opposite of being sex positive. So for me, it's about having to be transparent about it. It's actually about getting comfortable with people being uncomfortable. Fortunately, through my coaching work, I've had a practice with that. You get some pretty uncomfortable responses, whether it's from my family. My dad has been pretty awkward about it, but also very nice and kind. Doesn't understand it at all, but still, he's not stopped speaking to me. Shaming. I think there have been some conversations behind my back with my sister where he's like, what is she doing? That kind of thing. But there hasn't been the kink shaming to my face. But I chose to announce it on LinkedIn in my professional circle. And that was quite interesting to see some of the responses there. There was definitely a few uncomfortable responses and a lot of people that haven't responded where they're probably so uncomfortable that means they won't respond to it as well. For me, it's about being in integrity with the value of being sex positive and trying to create this permission for pleasure in a responsible and ethical way for everybody.
I love the way you speak about it. It feels like you have made space for thinking about these things for yourself. As a communication specialist, that sounds like a perfect bridge of skills to create something for people to understand a certain topic better and learn from it. That sounds exciting. I'm thinking if there's anything that happened during this year where you were mostly getting rid of things and maybe acquiring some new. I'm talking about the Viking business partner, for example. Was there anything that you have lost or shed along the way that you would have rather not, that felt like it was a little bit unexpected, but not in the positive way?
Definitely. I don't want to skip over the emotional. I'm not going to use the word trauma because trauma is far too hyperbolic for what I'm pointing to, but the emotional attachment we have to stuff and belongings and to possessions. I knew that it was going to be freeing to let go of stuff. But there has definitely been some stuff that I've let go of that has also been slightly heartbreaking. Books have been a big one for me. My degrees are in literature, and I have always surrounded myself by books, even though I'm not a big reader anymore. I tend to listen to audiobooks a lot. So I'd had these books that have been sat on my shelf for the last 25 years, but they were always part of my environment, an important part. Anytime I'd ever moved into a new home, it didn't feel like home until my books were on the shelves. So shedding books has been difficult, but then you find ways of doing it where you really just turn that narrative around. So I ended up donating a lot of my books to a school. I specialised in studying a lot of Black American women writers, and I ended up going to a school where there were a lot of Black British girls at this school that absolutely snapped these books up and, really, really have completely immersed themselves in reading them and taking them on. For me, that turned the story around. It wasn't about me letting go of something that was important to my life. It was about me gifting something and giving those books new life as well. So there has definitely been some moments around that. Letting go of the house was hard. The house was lovely. It was a really beautiful, warm and wonderful place to live. And I didn't know how it was going to feel on the other side of that. I have no regrets about getting rid of any of those things, but there was definitely an emotional labour that needed to be done around that process of getting rid of them.
Yeah, I can imagine that saying goodbye to a home you have dreamt of must have been really hard. Do you know anything about what is happening there now? Do you know anything about the people that bought it from you?
Yeah, I do, because the lady that I accepted the offer from was a friend of a friend. She found out about me selling the house because of my friend, not through the estate agent. We're actually still in touch, and I'm invited around for tea. I'm still really good friends with my neighbours as well. I haven't yet been back, but the door is very much open for me to go back. And I will go back quite soon, I think, to visit. We've kept in touch, and she loves it. Absolutely loves living there. And I know that it was actually a really important thing to me, was because I had quite a few offers on the house. It was important to choose someone to accept an offer from that would not just see it as a house, but see themselves almost as a custodian of stories. Although living in that house, you have no responsibility for the graveyard at all. There is something about living in a graveyard where there are about 120,000 people buried there, where you become very aware that that's 120,000 stories right on your doorstep. I did feel a degree of responsibility to those people, to keep some of their memory alive, to visit their graves. I would walk around the graveyard every day with the dogs, just to clear a piece of litter off of their graves, silly little things like that. It's just about having that recognition that there's a degree of respect required when you live in a property like that. And that was a really important thing to me. And the lady that bought it for me absolutely got that.
I also feel that there is something that you have acquired while shedding this. And it's this connection with that person. You've been talking a lot about dating on the road or having this close relationship with your work colleague. It feels like it's not just a year of shedding, but a year of exchange. And by getting rid of certain elements of your life, you made space for others. Is there anything that you feel especially happy about in that sphere? The things that you have acquired this year, did any of them bring you special joy?
All of them. If you'd asked me the question without the preamble, that would have been my answer. It's the capacity to connect with new people. It's like a new life of bringing new stories into weaving with my own. I feel like I've found people like me, interesting people, delightful people. I found people that are uniquely different from one another. I love people. I love human beings. I often refer to human beings as wonderfully ridiculous. We're wonderful, we're brilliant, and our brilliance is often ridiculous as well. I just find human beings amusing. That capacity to connect with people around the sense of playfulness has really opened up for me. I've definitely acquired that capacity to connect, the capacity to have greater compassion to other people, the capacity to be in nature a lot more, to reflect a lot more, to reconnect with myself as well. Like moving all of the stuff out of the way and separating my identity from what I own. And recognizing that my identity is more about who I am than what I own has been a really big thing that I've acquired this year. There's a great book called Stuffication, and it talks about shedding stuff, getting rid of stuff. But it talks about different frameworks of thinking about doing it as well. So it's not just the Marie Kondo, approach to like looking at something and asking whether it brings you joy and getting rid of it. There's a lot more complexity around it. For me, a big part of the commitment to shedding and getting rid of stuff is to recognize what it's in service of. Because if you don't start to create a vision for what is the other side of that, you will still just continue to hang on to the stuff. It's what you know. It's the easiest thing to do. So you've got to kind of get really excited about what that future looks like without the stuff in order for you to actually do the work and want to get rid of it as well. That's been one of the more fulfilling pieces of this.
For me, also one of the most informative, and I don't know if wise is the right adjective to use, part of our conversation. I'm definitely going to keep using this question from now on. What is this thing in service of? A lot of things we do on autopilot without thinking too much about them. What is this lipstick in service of? Who am I perform for?
I can't take credit for it. It comes from my own coach asking me that question when I've been declaring things that I want to work on. For me, that question frees you from a lot of anxiety because we often set goals and there are things that we want, but we get very attached to it needing to go in a particular way. This is one that I'm exploring with partnerships and relationships in my life at the moment. Instead of saying in my kind of polycule that I'm trying to design for myself, I need this kind of person and that kind of person. By asking the question, what's this in service of? It opens up a lot more space for creativity and imagination in how you get to that thing, like how you get to that end result. Because the result isn't about having the person. The result is about the life you create with that person and the energy that it creates. That means there are infinite different ways of getting to that result rather than it having to be just one way.
How liberating as well, right?
Yeah, hugely.
Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me. I would like to refer whoever's listening to this to Tracy's website, which is respectableking.com. And the book, when it's coming, I'm going to make sure to mention this also if this podcast continues, as I hope it will. Thanks so much. Tracy, we're talking today from your van, right?
We are indeed. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm in the van right now.
I'm at home. Unusual occasion for me. So I'm pretty happy that we both connected from our homes and had this lovely conversation. Thanks so much. I'm going to wave the closing motion.
I love the mushroom.
Thanks again. It was so lovely to talk to you. And I feel so inspired by the whole story and the wisdom that radiates from you. I love that. This is it for today. More stories will be coming soon. If you would like to help them reach more humans out there, please leave a rating or a comment. I will appreciate all feedback. And if you have or know of a story that is waiting to be told, please get in touch. I would love to hear from you.